of being separated from your mother, being separated from the bottle, being separated and on your own at various points, even outgrowing your clothes. I want you to remember that feeling and how exciting and scary and freeing and vulnerable you were. I submit that everyone in this church, with the exception of the small minority who grew up here, and it is a small minority, feels like one or more of three things. They feel lost, you feel like exiles, or you feel like pilgrims. And the thing they have in common is they're all forms of homelessness. That's what you have in common, each of you, the sense of having been one place and going to another. If you are someone who grew up here, that makes you unusual. But I'll bet any time you talk to even one who grew up here, they will remember a time when they thought about leaving or pondered it. The point here is I want you to get in touch with your spiritual homelessness. I want to talk about those who were lost. Lost, of course, is a TV show that I never, ever saw. So I only had to look it up on Wikipedia to see what was going on. I said, that's a very strange program. The one that I grew up with was Gilligan's Island, which is equally strange in its own way. But I found the premise of both of them unsettling. I don't like stories of people who can't get back home. I find them innately uncomfortable. I hated watching The Fugitive because it just went on and they never got anywhere. The people on Gilligan's Island kept trying to leave the island and never could. But of course, the whole story of Israel in the wilderness is 30 years of being unable to go 300 miles. Of course, they didn't have good maps, so maybe they literally were wandering around and couldn't find their way, but I doubt that. The point of being lost is that you have a home, but you can't get there. Have you ever felt lost? You know where you belong, you just know you're not there. And so you're looking for the home. You're looking for a home you would know it when you run into it. One of my favorite stories as a child, I should have read this today. It just occurred to me as I'm saying this, God save me if I'm off track now. A little book called Harold and the Purple Crayon. Ah, you've heard of it. A little boy who has a dream, who goes wandering with his crayon and draws waves and sharks and balloons and wants to find his way back home. And eventually realizes that his home is in his bed, and his bed is under a window. And so he draws a window and a curtain and a bed, and he's home. I read that over and over again as a child. It was so touching and affecting because it was saying, I know where I need to be, I just need to find a way to get there. But of course, just like the fabled end of the movie of The Wizard of Oz, the point is you never actually left home. It was always with you. You just had to claim it if you could. Those who come to a liberal church sometimes are people who feel lost. They know where they want their home to be, but it isn't where they've been and where they're going. And they're looking, they're saying, are you my home? Is there a book out there, another kid's book, Are You My Mother? Same theme, you know what I mean. Are you the person I need to be with? Are you the place I need to be? Are you the faith I need to have? They know it's there. They're looking for it. They're looking for that sense of belonging. And often they will stick around a place like ours, and we're not the only one, by the way, for a number of years, but a few of them will actually find out their home is not here. I told someone once that when we do newcomers visits here, people who are putting their foot in the water, as I put it, that we tell them, it's not important to us that you join Fountain Street Church. It's important for you to be where you belong. We want this to be a place to help you be where you belong. And for some of you, it is the right place to be. But for others, this is a step on your way to where you belong. And our job is not to say, please come to Fountain Street Church. It's to please become the person and be in the place where you need to be. So for the lost, we want to be a help, a guide, maybe some company. Because plenty of us have been lost at some point, and we end up here for a month or a year or perhaps half of our lives or perhaps our whole lives. But we remember what it felt like to feel lost, cut off, unable to go or be where we wanted to be. A kind of homelessness that we project upon those who live on the street. And I say project because some of them actually do choose to live on the street, and for them it is home, and they choose it. But my point here is that the feeling of being lost is something we all know. Whether we're in a car and can't find our way, whether you were like me at 9 years old, lost in a shopping mall that you've never seen before, looking for your mother, whether you were out in the woods and forgot where the trail was, whether you were going down the hallways of a college building and did not know what room you were in. We've all been lost, and our hearts know how distressing that is. And the most important thing when you encounter someone who's lost is to say, I'll stick around with you until you find your way. That's what we're here to do, to be a place of comfort and company for the lost. But that's only one way to be homeless. And let's remember that we have great company, not only Israel, not only in the wilderness, but Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, even the great Ulysses or Odysseus were people who were lost, looking to find their way back. Another sort of people who are spiritually homeless are exiles. These are people who have a home, but they can't go back. They've been thrown out. Israel, again, is a prime example, but years later when they were thrown out of the land now called Palestine, but they were also thrown out of their own land by the Babylonians, which is where Jeremiah comes into the picture, remembering how they once had a home and then when they were thrown out, they were exiles, they were banished. But let's remember that passage from Genesis I read at the beginning, how at the very beginning of the story, Adam and Eve are thrown out of the garden. They're banished, they're exiled. So the whole story that forms these three great religions starts with an act of banishment, of being thrown out of where you belong and being told you can't go back. But of course, we all know that there's another version of being exiled. There's also looking for refuge. Those who cannot go where they want, look for a place where they can be welcomed. And as I've pointed out, one of the great texts in American history is that of Emma Lazarus, who wrote the wonderful sonnet about the Statue of Liberty and renames her the mother of exiles. And that we consider this country in some place to be a refuge for those who cannot be where they want to be, but who have been thrown out. And how many of you spiritually have had that experience? You grew up perhaps in another faith community, and at some point you asked the wrong question, did the wrong thing, failed to follow the rules, and you were shown the door. You were exiled. Sometimes you married the wrong person, which may not mean that they're a bad person for you, but you were not in an approved status with someone else. Perhaps you were gay. Perhaps you married outside the faith. And I understand in certain parts of West Michigan that can be a marriage between Dutch Reformed and Christian Reformed. The fences can be drawn rather tight at times, and you can be banished without too much effort. So the sense of being exiled, that's a story many of you have, a spiritual story of being thrown out, being pushed out of the community, being told you don't belong where you thought you belonged. And how painful is that, to be told, no, you're not one of us, that your DNA doesn't match us, even that you are not only, it's the reverse of adoption. You're being repudiated by the people you claimed and thought were your own. What a terrible place to be. And for people like that, we can be a refuge, a reminder that there is no place where a person is not welcome. That's why that vision of Isaiah is so important to me. A house of prayer for all people is not about the prayer, it's about the all part. That there are places on the planet that need to exist, ours being one of them, where if you're human, you belong. That's it. You don't have to raise your hand or say the right words or wave the magic incantations. You just have to turn up, because we need you to be human. That's all we ask. Are you a human being? Great, you belong. In fact, I'd say that at least one Sunday a year during Reverence for Life, the animals belong here too. And sometimes they're some of them are the best behaved members I've ever seen. In fact, if they only had checkbooks, I could really make some, never mind. I need you, I want them. How about that?